zoning. R2 and R3 single-family residence to SPPUD Special Purpose Plan Unit Development. The application is Springfield Township Board of Trustees and the Finneytown Local School District. The property owner is the Springfield Township Board of Trustees and the Finneytown Local School District. And this is the property on the east side of Winton Road, across from Timber Trail and extending east to North Bend Road. Mr. Gilbert, before we go into that, let's go over a few ground rules for the hearing tonight. For any of you that's not familiar with this process, this hearing is mandated by the Ohio Revised Code, and I'm going to explain how we're going to conduct the hearing this evening. The Board of Trustees has responsibility to make final decisions on any zone changes, whether it be a text amendment to our zoning code, or in this case, a map amendment that changes the zoning on properties. This is why we're having the hearing tonight. Generally, these cases are handled in the following way. Staff, Mr. Chris Gilbert, is going to provide the board with a staff report outlining the particulars of the case in the application. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff and then ask for their presentation, the applicant's presentation. In this case, since the Board of Trustees is the applicant's staff report and the applicant's presentation are one and the same. It's a little unique, but that's because the township is the owner of the property. After the staff report, then proponents and opponents will be permitted to address the board. We'd ask that you please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Any and all comments that would be made by anyone that does wish to speak this evening should be directed to the board, not to staff, not to the audience. We're going to ask then staff to answer, if there are any questions that anyone has, we'll ask staff to answer them if we deem them to be pertinent or relevant to the case. And we would ask that everyone try to be concise with your comments. This is an opportunity that if you have an opinion or there's some fact you want to share with us, then we're here to listen to that. But if there's somebody that's gotten up and said the exact same thing that you were going to say, it's okay to get up and say, I agree with the last person or someone. You don't have to necessarily repeat everything they said. Once that proponents and opponents have had an opportunity to address the board, then we'll close the public comment portion of this meeting, and the board will deliberate prior to making a decision. During that time, there's not to be any more comments from the public. We'll be done at that point. This is a public hearing. We want to hear what everyone has to say. We ask that everybody be courteous and respect the rights of others. With that, I think Mr. Gilbert will move on to the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Hunterlaw. As you had mentioned, this evening is case ZC 2016-02, which is being referenced as the core PUD plan. Specifically, this is a zone change from the current zoning designations of R2 and R3 single-family residential to SPPUD, Special Purpose Plan Unit Development. Outlined in the staff report are the pertinent parcel numbers that are part of this particular proposed map amendment and their current zoning classification. As a description of the site, as you briefly mentioned, you can see it here in the submitted and the developed zoning plat, which shows the area in which is being proposed to be rezoned and all of the specific parcels associated with that application. Consolidated together, all of these parcels, there's roughly 16 or 17 different parcels that make up a little over 60 acres. There's a frontage of approximately 621 feet on Winton and another 465 feet on North Bend Road. The existing development of the property is township use or unimproved property, and then the Whitaker Elementary School site here, which fronts North Bend Road, which makes up the majority of the frontage that I described a second ago. The surrounding conditions that you have adjacent to this particular piece of property, to the north you have RPUD and R2. RPUD being, and this laser pointer isn't showing up very well on the screen, so I apologize. But you have the RPUD here, which is the St. Vivian School and Church. RPUD in this vicinity here, which is the Central Park condominium development. You have to the north R2 single family, to the west R2 single family, and to the south you have R3 single family. To the west, to the southwest, you have R2 single family as well. So again, surrounding is a varied uses, combining both school, church use, multifamily in terms of central parking, single family in terms of the residential development, and not too far away, here at North Bend and Winton, you have retail and office uses. As the board is aware, the township acquired the majority of the land shown on the submitted preliminary development plan back in 1999 with the purchase of the former Water Nursery property. Just for those in the audience, and just to reiterate with the board, the area that's technically the water property that was acquired in 99 is this roughly 42 acres here that has a little sliver going out to Winton Road. The remaining acreage that you see is the school property here on Winton, that's currently Finneytown Local School District, and the parcels that make up additional acres that was acquired by the township over the past decade because of its adjacency to Water Nursery. While the Finneytown Local School Districts are the co-applicant in this case, they have no immediate plans to vacate the Whitaker Elementary School site, and their participation in this rezoning is simply an effort to provide additional options for the utilization of that site into the future. Originally, the township's intentions were to control the site and prevent undesirable residential development. The Board of Trustees, as you're aware, initiated a park plan and feasibility study shortly after taking ownership of that property. For a variety of reasons, including funding and a shift in the needs and desires of the community, a mixed-use development was pursued for the property rather than a standalone park. In 2011, as the board is intimately aware, the township embarked on a fairly comprehensive master plan steering committee effort to develop a plan for the entire township, and the redevelopment, or in this case, the development of this particular piece of property into a mixed-use site was incorporated in that comprehensive neighborhood master plan back in 2011. As you're aware, that plan was made up of well over 70 members. They recommended and approved the conceptual development plan back in 2011. And since that time, we have been working to pursue a development of that property. Fast forward 5 years and looking at taking the development of the property and implementing the plan that was created in 2011 to the next level, the township entered into a master development agreement for the site. And this particular requested zone change that we're hearing this evening is necessary to enable the proposed mixed-use development as outlined in the Township Comprehensive Neighborhood Master Plan from 2011. And then additionally, that was reaffirmed and adjusted by the Neighborhood Master Plan Steer Committee of well over 50 members just this year over the past 3 or 4 months. We went back in and looked at this plan again. They made some changes, which in fact the plan that's a part of the overall updated comprehensive neighborhood master plan is the actual preliminary development plan that is under review and subject to possible approval this evening. And actually, the mixed-use development concept that's shown in the plan is not feasible under the current zoning designation. So the SPPUD is the only mechanism within the current zoning code that would allow a development such as that's being proposed in the neighborhood master plan. So in order for allow the dedicated open space, the variety of residential that's shown in this particular plan with a mixture of office and retail, all within a single comprehensive development. The SPPUD classification is the necessary and the only means in which to allow a combination of the different district provisions and the unique design considerations that the plan calls for. The proposed zone change is consistent with the township land use plan, which you see here, which shows the hashed area, which is the core area land use plan map, which if you refer back to what's in the current neighborhood master plan, basically shows a development area such as this that encourages redevelopment of properties to the north, the preservation of single-family areas to the north as well. But here in the pink magenta color is really where the entire core area is looked at, and in particular the water site, or what we're referring to as the township-owned core property, is included in a much larger area that the committee and obviously the Board of Trustees have slated for redevelopment and have specific redevelopment plans for those areas. This is simply one and scheduled to be or desired to be sort of the catalyst and allows it to foster additional development that would eventually implement this entire plan. The Hamilton County Planning Commission and the Township Zoning Commission both have reviewed the proposed application and recommended approval. Specifically, the Township Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing regarding this case on June 20th of this year and is recommending approval. You have that recommendation included with your staff report this evening. Going back to the plan itself, the vehicular access points to the proposed development are anticipated to be off of Winton Road in North Bend. Here, diagram is shown in the red hashed arrows. Obviously, the one you see here to the north is preferable. However, that would involve a redevelopment of the site that currently where the Whitaker Elementary School sits. As I mentioned earlier in the staff report, the school district has no immediate plans. They're still in discussions as to what they ultimately do with their properties. This was simply showing this as a possible entrance in the event that their school site, for some reason, is vacated in that location and that property is able to be redeveloped. Obviously, the area down here shows an entrance where the township currently owns a portion of the property that extends to Winton. And as the board is aware, the township has a land swap agreement with the school district that would allow additional property to be acquired to allow more adequate entrance into the site. Additionally, this plan shows some pedestrian connectivity to adjacent neighborhoods. Obviously, these are conjecture at this point. There would have to be significant discussions with those neighborhoods where those are being proposed, and potentially whether or not those pedestrian access points would be permitted would be shown on the final development plan, and ultimately that would be before a public hearing with the Zoning Commission. Approximately a third of the development is being proposed as green space, as shown here in the northwest portion of the site the northeast portion of the site extending east to Winton to buffer the properties and to provide community open space and green space. Additionally, on the south part of the site, we're showing a buffering area to buffer the development from the adjoining residential properties to the south as well. The mixed-use area shown here, again, a portion of that is the Whitaker Elementary School site, but this particular area could be mixed use, could be a combination of residential, office, and or retail. Again, to the North Bend side of the site, we're showing additional mixed use with buffering to the north and south, and just west of that is predominantly slated as residential due to the topography of the area and just the likelihood that that makes a more suitable site for residential part of the property. The more detailed building design, materials, site layout, density, setbacks, and possible uses will be shown on and prior to the approval of a final development plan. However, as shown on the submitted preliminary development plan, specific parameters and guidelines are being established now in this preliminary process to ensure that any future development meets the standards and goals specified in the comprehensive neighborhood master plan. And just for a matter of record, I'll read those development standards, if you will, or guidelines that we would look for when a final development plan is proposed, is that this redevelopment should create a legacy community a park public gathering space that includes a mixed-use residence, office, and retail development versus just a mixed-use development with a park. So the idea, what that really means is that this would be a very park-like setting with some development within it versus a development with a small park within it. Additionally, the idea would be to create public space, a park, including a central gathering area, possibly an amphitheater and a community arts facility. It would preserve and enhance existing ponds in order to accentuate their use as a focal point of the development. It would preserve the large canopy trees to the best extent possible, preserve environmentally sensitive areas, including wetlands, streams, and habitats, and encourage a pedestrian-friendly environment for the entire community by providing connection between adjacent neighborhoods, green spaces, parks, and commercial areas via walking, biking, and sidewalks. Provide tree-lined primary and secondary streets with pedestrian network, connecting Winton and North Bend roads and the identified Township Cultural Trail, which is something that's identified in the 2011 plan, which shows a variety of uses along the Winton Road corridor, such as schools and churches and things that are of possible unique interest to people traveling along Winton Road. It would provide tree-lined primary and secondary streets within the pedestrian network, as I mentioned, and it would also promote the use of sustainable design, building materials, and construction practices within a consistent architectural style that complements the natural surroundings, meaning a park-like feel, and the adjacent residential uses. The mixed-use area would encourage mixed-use neighborhood retail, office, and residential within, again, a pedestrian-friendly development. I see a theme developing here that we really want this to be walkable. We want this to be something to be enjoyed by the entire community, and the pedestrian access, the hiking and walking and biking trails are something that's very important to the image and the character of this development. It would incorporate enhanced public plazas, parks, and gathering spaces, sidewalk-oriented cafes, and pedestrian-friendly environments within the mixed-use development. It would promote complementary uses and neighborhood-based commercial opportunities. And then lastly, the residential development would ultimately promote a range of residential density and housing types to cater to a variety of demographics. Basically what that means is it could potentially be patio homes, it could be condos, it could be single family. Those are the attached multifamily. It could be a variety of uses that cater to a multitude of different types of people that are looking for housing. Lastly, in the staff report are the recommended staff conditions. These 4 staff conditions are ones that we typically look to and include in any preliminary development plan review and approval. And those are that the final development plan shall be required to achieve consistency with the county thoroughfare plan and access management rules. The final grading, drainage, and compliance with any flood management areas shall be the subject of approval of the County Public Works Department and Soil and Water District. Any alterations to the preliminary development plan shall be subject to the approval of the Zoning Commission, and if applicable, the Board of Township Trustees through the submittal of a revised preliminary development plan. And then lastly, that all other zoning requirements, unless otherwise noted on the preliminary development plan, shall be in accordance with the provision of the applicable provisions of the Township Zoning Resolution, and then the most recent comprehensive neighborhood master plan, which is directly where this, as I mentioned, the preliminary plan comes out of. The preliminary plan that you're reviewing here tonight is the exact plan that was recommended and ultimately approved by this board as part of the comprehensive neighborhood master plan. So I know that was fairly brief, and I apologize, mainly because obviously the trustees are intimately aware with this development. We've had several public hearings on not only this particular possible development, but the neighborhood master plan in general. So that would conclude my staff report, unless there are any questions of the board.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Does the board have any questions concerning the report? The only question I have, Chris, and this is, it's currently zoned R2 and R3.
That's correct.
Are there any, if the zoning is left where it is, are there any green space or buffering
No, and in fact,
requirements?
there's a graphic that we have that we put together just to show what potentially could be possible under the current zoning designation. Without the requirement of a zone change or anything, simply the property could be sold, a developer could come in, build this development without the requirement of maintaining any green space whatsoever, and it could look like that. Which essentially shows an extenuation of the R3 single-family development and the density that allows in the neighborhood to the south of this property.
Well, is it all R3 there?
Yes, this entire area to the south of the property we're referring to is all R3.
Okay,
This property is all R3 here. This area is R2. This area is R2. So the majority of the site, which is technically what you would refer to as the Warder property, is all R3.
okay. That was the only question that I had. Anything else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Next, we're going to have the public comment portion of the meeting. Are there any opponents to the proposed zone change that would like to speak this evening? Yes, ma'am. And again, we would ask that everyone, I know there's been some people that came in before or while I was sort of talking at the beginning of the case, would ask that everyone come to the podium, state your name and address. Everyone else be quiet, we'll be respectful, and we can listen to what anyone has to say. And we'd ask that you address your comments to the board.
My name is Tammy Profiter. I work in St. X High School, but I live on 730 West North Bend Road, and I just have some comments that I wouldn't necessarily I'm opposed to, but I think are mindful to the current plan that I think are pertinent. And I think one of them, the first one, is related to the traffic. If you look at the exit at North Bend Road, that's at a very bad corner. There's many wrecks on North Bend already without the traffic there, and I think especially specifically with retail and 1,600, sorry, I love them all, young boys coming around that corner, it scares me a little bit, to be honest with you. So that specific area of concern for me, living on the street, having witnessed, I should say I've lived there my entire life. So that's family property. So the 10 acres that are just directly adjacent are myself, my mother, my aunt, and my uncle's houses. And so I'm very familiar with the area. I'm very familiar with Warder. I think the majority of the plan is outstanding. My other concern is the green parcel next to the mixed use. I'm not a fan of the mixed use area, the blue. So I'm more specifically concerned, I'm sorry, my parcel is 730 West North Bend Road. So I'm directly adjacent to the residential area. So my concern isn't with Warder, which is probably where most people's concerns are. If you kept R2, for me, it's beneficial because the long strips of land surrounding my property would be held more in contact. I built my house behind my mom in the height of the building boom. We spent $300,000 on it. It is now way underwater. I'm not opposed to residential going around me. I think it will help me. I think it's a great plan. Again, the traffic concerns me. The business portion right there concerns me. And then if you look, there's green space directly next to where the red arrows are. That's my mom's property. It cuts off at my property. Our driveway runs right on there. The property that's in question, that's going to be residential behind the green space, so yeah, right there, where the bottom part of it, that was a plot owned by Mr. Blank. He was a handyman and a plumber. There is a pool buried there. There's a septic buried there. There's an outhouse, and there are gas lines that have not been properly disposed of. So trying to turn that into somebody's yard is going to be very costly and very prohibitive in terms of trying to get it to residential grade. There's a lot of work. It was just covered over. And it's all there. We told them there as the people were out to the land. So my request or suggestion is if you extended the green space into the parcel, that would be 590-0204-0019. I mean, 10, not just 09. You might help yourself a little bit just knowing that that property, at least half of it, the half that's adjacent to us, has a lot of costly things that were going to have to be replaced in that area. So I think those are my main points.
She's talking about the space over here. She's saying make it come over this way. Okay.
Any questions?
I don't believe I have any, but those are very good comments. Thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
Next, is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening?
Hi, my name is Sybil Daniels, and I live at 880 Denier Place. And I prepared a statement, and it's basically a reflection and some questions and so forth. And I'd just like to read it in its entirety, and then if there's some specific things that you would like to respond to, then, but basically, I just want to go through the entire thing, because I've been thinking about this for a number of months now, and I'm really very opposed to the development. So let me begin just reading the statement. My family moved to Finneytown in 1977.
We want to hear you.
Okay, thank you. My family moved to Finneytown in 1977. We found a house that we loved, and we had 3 small children, and we were also very impressed with the school system, which was at that time rated excellent. Over the years, I've seen the community change and have had mixed feelings about the changes, but overall, I still love my house and I love living in the township. And I've been happy with the trustees' leadership until now. The issue with Wilder is one that I'm very troubled about for several reasons. The main thing that bothers me most is the element of materialism. I know that money is important, but we, as a supposedly superior species, show little regard for our environment or the creatures that we share it with, and we think that money is a solution to every problem. As I've followed the debate and the opposition to the development, I've had several questions that came to mind, and I wondered if you, as elected trustees, have looked into other alternatives of bringing revenue into the township, or investigated other communities that have dealt with revenue problems that we face and how they solve those revenue problems. I would also like to know if the needs of the residents in the township have been factored into the plans for development. In the 39 years that I've lived in Finneytown, I've observed changes in the retail establishments in our area based on losing a hardware store, the bookstore that were both in Brentwood, and an upscale Chinese restaurant on Galbraith, and other retail operations that have left the community. I wonder if you have taken into account what products and services this community will actually support. If the number of fast food places and dollar stores are an indication of the spending in the community, I'm doubtful that your suggestions that the land at Wilder be used for upscale senior housing and the other wonderful plans that we saw today. I have some questions about that. So I'm basically wondering if the income levels and spending patterns of the current residents have been taken into account in terms of the development plans. During the last meeting I attended, there were some residents that were here, and they were very upset because their community is going into decline with the people that have rented their homes to Section 8 people who are not keeping up their property and so forth and so on. And it seemed to me when I listened to those comments that if we want our community to retain a stable middle to upper middle class resident base and be able to attract responsible homeowners with the income that allows them to properly maintain their property, I think that in addition to the development, one of the things that we as a community should be looking into is a homeowners association that assures that people that buy in Affinitown keep their property at an acceptable level. Many homeowner associations have fines attached to homeowners who do not keep their property up to code. And having such an association in the township, if it's possible, would allow us a source of revenue for the people that don't adhere and comply to the rules. Those people would be fined. And also, we would be assured that our property would be going up in value rather than down. The people that were here at the last meeting are concerned because their neighborhood is going into decline with drugs, not maintaining property, all sorts of things. And I would hate to think that if we don't address that issue, and we sacrifice Walder for what we think are going to be wonderful returns, only to have a community that goes into decline because of negligent homeowners who do not want to keep their property well maintained. In closing, I'd just like to have us sort of think about some things in terms of that beautiful space. It's a space that we can never replicate, and even though we know that we have landscapers that have created beautiful spaces, nature has provided us with an incredible natural space, as well as not only here, but all over the world. We are such a lucky species to be able to enjoy that. But we're not the only creatures that enjoy those spaces. There are creatures that depend on those spaces for their sustenance, their home, everything. We as Homo sapiens benefit from these spaces, both because of their beauty and the recreational activities we engage in when we visit those spaces. Unfortunately, as in the case of Wilder, we forget that those spaces are homes for flora and fauna that may become victims of our need to bring revenue into the township. I do know that money makes the world go round, but I also know that in comparison to a tree or a sea turtle, some of them live hundreds of years, and in some instances, some trees live thousands of years. We need to reflect on our superiority. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We
Yeah.
truly appreciate them. I tried to keep track of some of the questions you raised, and, I
Do you
can't,
have a copy of that? Or do you have a copy that we can have?
I can make copies, and I just have this.
well, that's fine.
We'll take that.
Are you okay? Thank you. I guess I would just say, to address some of the questions you raised, the township has explored other revenue sources, and I would have to say that the primary reason that this property is being considered for a rezoning is not for the money that it's going to bring to Springfield Township, to this government entity, but for how it's going to be a positive, we hope, catalyst to help remedy some of the things. When you're talking about neighborhoods going down, we're talking about, what kind of products will the community support. We're looking for something that will be catalytic, that will help improve our neighborhoods as a whole, not just this particular property, specifically, but the rest of the community. And we think that a new development like this will bring some of that new energy and make the community more relevant going into the future. You're absolutely.
I can appreciate that, and from the design, it's lovely with the buffer spaces and holding on to a large section of the natural space. However, I get kind of concerned. I've lived in this neighborhood for 39 years, and when you look at North Bend, where Schuler's used to be, You've got that concrete space where Kroger's used to be, where Big Lots used to be, where Chase Bank is. So you have all of these concrete spaces that, you know, and I'm not just talking about.
This is over in College Hill you're talking about?
Right,
Yeah.
I'm talking about this whole area. When we look at the fact that we think that we are making progress and with you know, retail this and this, and it doesn't work. And then we have these concrete spaces that just take away from everything. And again, when you think about an animal, how urban animals have to adapt to having their environment taken away, and then you have a space like on North Bend with Schuler's and Kroger's, and where Big Lots used to be going down Galbraith, those places have been concrete jungles for a number of years, which serves no purpose. I would rather see spaces where that's torn up and people can have community gardens, or we can use the rooftops like they're doing in Chicago for growing crops on rooftops. And there are things that we can do that are both beneficial to everyone in the community, and I'm including the animals, and I'm including the people who have limited means, who could really benefit from having that concrete jungle on Galbraith broken up and having a little community garden, family garden that they can go. There's so many positive things that I think with some out-the-box thinking, without sacrificing a space that has been absolutely a home for those creatures and those trees for a number of years. And I know this is an issue. I'm not really sure, again, as I stated in my letter that I wrote, that will the community support what you're proposing? That lovely restaurant on Galbraith, we used to go, a lovely, very upscale Chinese restaurant. It folded. Why? There was not community support to go to that particular restaurant. So we really have to, I think, be very mindful of the income level and the spending level before we sacrifice that space. We have to know that there are people that are really going to come and have their dollars really revitalize and do what you want your plan to do.
I agree with that, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Carrie Reisner, and I live at 856 Denier Place. I had a presentation on a flash drive, but I was told I couldn't present it that way. Okay, so I've got hard copies, and because of all the ink, it sucked up all the ink in my printer, and so I could only come up with 3 copies.
That's okay.
So I'll have to share.
Do you have one, or do you?
I do. Mhm. Okay. I've brought this to you it was during the month of May, and we'll just go over this very quickly. It's a copy of the limited warranty deed. And if you go down near the bottom to Part B, it says for not less than 10 years of the date of delivery of this deed to the township, its successors, or assigns shall not use or permit the use of the property for other than park and recreational purposes. During that 10-year period, the township shall develop and implement a park plan for the property for its use as a park and recreational site. And then it goes on further about you can't build buildings and so on and so forth. And then, my point being made in May is that I know that you pursued a park plan and it was never implemented. It is my impression, since I haven't lived in Finneytown very long, but it's my impression from 2000 and the purchase of Warder to 2010, the 10-year period that this condition addresses, that were the gates ever opened? You know how there's a gate along that skinny strip that comes off of Winton? There's a gate there.
I know where, yeah.
And it's my impression that that's not been opened since it was purchased. Is that correct?
people move.
I don't think that, we've never opened this space as a, park to the public. It's never been developed, we've never developed it that way. We did implement a park plan, which we went through, oh my goodness, what, a year or two worth of hearings, Mike? Some of this I can put back.
You obtained a plan.
to you.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
And,
Because it was my impression that it's never been open to the public, and you're saying that's correct.
Well, I think there's been a lot of people that have gone in there, but has it
Yeah.
ever been, did we construct that original plan? No. And it
Okay.
became-
We didn't let cars drive back there. on
Right,
the
because there's a driveway that goes off of okay. And then, okay, thank you very much. And the second page, because I don't want to take up too much time, because I know that there's a couple pages to this. The second page is the bubble diagram. And if you go to the third page, that I got off your website, and that shows a conceptual rendering of what the development might look like. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, that
Okay.
was several years ago, and it is conceptual. There's
Right.
a lot of property on here that the township does not own.
Right, and I understand that this is not like an approved, embraced plan or anything, it's just conceptual of what the space may look like. And then I noticed part of this, that it includes, up Winton Road is businesses, and then the strip malls up at the corner would be reworked and redeveloped, correct? According to this plan?
Conceptually, that was the plan.
Okay, all right. So if you'll go to the next page, this is the reason why we're here opposing this. The words I've heard used, what a jewel of a place this is. When I went back there, the word that I felt is stunning. The place is stunning. It's unlike any other place I've been. It's not just a big old clump of trees just like you can find in most county parks. Because it was a nursery with a road, and there's open meadow areas and the two ponds. I mean, it's really a special place. That's why there's the opposition that exists. So I just wanted to present a couple visuals to you of the beauty and a special place. This is why we're fighting for this. We feel this is an asset to the community. This builds value to our homes, not just for the people that live around the park, but for those of us that do. We feel it should be open to the whole community, and it should be made easy to come into this. One thing with a natural space, that it doesn't have a fashion. Buildings that are built usually have, like a generational longevity. And after about 20, 30 years, they start looking a little tired, old, dirty, and they're no longer fashionable. This asset that you already have won't go out of fashion. So I included a couple of my favorite pictures. So the one with the pond includes the duck. And this is one of the most lovely ones when you're leaving. This asset provides health to those of us that go back there. It provides psychological benefits. This can be a huge benefit to your school, to Whitaker. There's a movement in Europe afoot where they're merging schools and forests together, and it sounds like a hippy-dippy thing, and it's probably going to come to the United States in another 5 years about forest kindergartens and stuff, but this would be a fabulous asset to your school system. And lastly, I've got a picture of Brentwood, and I actually drove down the street the other night and counted empty business entities on the right going north on Winton and on the left. And on the right, there was about 4, so not a lot. The real problem is in the standing professional buildings, and my next project will be to go into those and actually count numbers and doors of who's occupied and who's not. But I think that's where the real problem lies, isn't so much in the strip mall, because we like to drive up and get out of our cars and go into our businesses. But on the left, at the Brentwood shopping plaza, there were 3 empty out of about 17 or 18. But unfortunately, one of those three is one of the anchor spots. There's two large anchor spots, one is occupied and one is empty. So even though there's three, it takes up around 20%, at least 20% of the whole strip mall, possibly 25%. I don't think it goes up to about 30, but it's a significant chunk, and it's sitting empty at the Brentwood Shopping Plaza. And as you know, this is like a 70s style. It probably went into the 70s based on the style where it has the big ocean parking lot, and it's out of favor. And that's part of the reason why you've got maybe up to a third sitting empty. So to me, this is a strong reason not to continue to pull your retail and office buildings down Winton Road. You've got a retail area that needs to be remade now, that could benefit from being remade. Your plan that I showed you a couple bit back, this showed the corner that exists as a strip mall being remade. Why couldn't you do that with Brentwood and take your nice concepts that you have for Warder up to Brentwood? It needs a little help. So there's, down in northern Kentucky where I came from, there were some really neat walkable, more pedestrian-style retail areas. You know, that's kind of the new fashion. In 20 years, that'll be out of fashion. That's what will happen to the Warder development in 20 years. It won't be out of fashion in 20 years if it remains the very valuable green space that it is. I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Susan Connell, 7125 Winton Road. I was not able to make the June 20th rezoning meeting. I was thankfully in South Dakota enjoying the beautiful scenery of the Badlands and the spires of South Dakota. Some forward-thinking people felt that that was an appropriate use of the land out there, and I agree with that. I am adamantly opposed to the Warder quote-unquote redevelopment. I think a redevelopment implies that it's already been developed. It has not been. I agree with Carrie's statements. I think she was very eloquent in her comments. I have stood before you before. At the last meeting, I wavered a little. I was here with my daughter, some emotional issues in terms of speaking emotionally about this property, but today I'm not here as an emotional resident. I'm here as a economist. I think that it is short-sighted to develop this property for mixed use, for retail, for homeowners. I agree again with Carrie. I see when I drive through the community, when I walk through the community, the blighted areas, the number of car dealerships that are now popping up, the liquor store, all things that are useful to an economy, but to have more than one of them, or to have that be what basically defines us, is inappropriate, and it won't bring you the kind of businesses that you're hoping to attract in this development. I too have questioned the core development misnomer, I think it is. It is not the core of Springfield Township. It abuts City of Cincinnati. The core, when I did a grass poll of neighbors and residents, is the Brentwood area. That is the residential area of what we consider the core development area. The Warder property is currently being used by the school district. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. The students do track meets back there. They also do science studies back there. The high school has a group of special needs students that go to the Warder Nursery and actually work at the Warder Nursery. It's a great program. It's been highlighted multiple times in the papers. I think it would be great to have that continue and to build on that. I think it's telling that I think it's the park board does not want, they did not say they did not want the rezoning, but they took a neutral political stand on that. I take that as to say that they don't think it's a good idea, but that's just my impression. I think that you have heard our requests and you have listened. gracefully to some degree, but I still think at the end of the day, it is a fiscally charged endeavor. We talked about that at the very beginning of this, that this is the reason why we're pursuing a development in Warder. I just agree with Carrie that once it's developed, it's like being a little bit pregnant. A little bit of development is not going to, you can't have it both ways. It's either developed or it's not developed. It's developed in a way that you see as a park-like setting versus a business with a park in it. That's semantics in my mind. I think that can be played either way. And I also, as a resident of Winton Road, that driveway is coming right in my front yard, pretty much right in my front yard, maybe a couple yards over. Right now, it's a 2-lane road. Will you make it a 3-lane with a turn, a 4-lane, with a turn lane in there? Is that something that's going to be addressed because it's clearly going to be needed? I go right to go left oftentimes, depending on the rush hour traffic. I can't tell you the number of people that have come careening around the bend on Winton. Most recently took out the sign on the Greek Orthodox Festival about 9 o'clock. Thankfully, nobody was there. It would have been a tragedy. That road is just over-traveled, overused, and it can't support anything. And that's, again, another economic issue that I have with this plan. I'm vehemently opposed to it. I thought I could support some mixed use and some whatever, but I really cannot. And so I am, for myself and my 2 children that are voting age, they asked me that I could express their displeasure at it as well for the zoning. They could not be here. So for our family, we feel that it is an inappropriate and unnecessary use of that land and cannot be reclaimed once you do determine to make it into something that it is not. And it is a park, whether you want to call it a park or not. There's lots of options you can do. I think we need to think outside the box, and I think you need to get people involved that are invested in this, not just people that have been invited to be your groups. And I was not able to be in one of those groups. I know people that have applied for them, and it's a limited number. 50 people is not the township. And again, Finneytown is the main neighborhood that's going to be impacted by this. Some of you, I don't know which ones, were at the parade on Monday. Finneytown is a close-knit community, and I don't think that this is our responsibility to economically lift Springfield Township out of its current circumstances. So I respectfully oppose it and hope that you'll take that into consideration, and I appreciate the time to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
My name's Tony Gargus. I live at 7236 Green Farms Drive, which is just down the street. It's like across Winton and that housing tract from the Greek Orthodox Church. So I've lived there for about 20-something years, and over the years, I've taken the opportunity to walk through Warder Nursery, even before the property was transferred to the township. And, my family has enjoyed it also. We take the dogs, let them go, run around. It is a really beautiful area. There are 2 lakes there. There's all kinds of nature. And walking through the area, I've seen red fox, deer. One day I saw an American bald eagle flying overhead. And it's just a great place. And to see it, and when word got out, hey, this is going to become a park, there's this potential. We were all extremely excited. And then over time, it's like, well, what's going on? Why isn't anyone doing anything to make this, more of a park, make it, more friendly to the residents for entry? And it just sat there. But it was still, great, accessible. There's a paved area that pretty much circles inside the park. So, we'd walk around that paved area. And then word got out, well, it's going to be potentially developed. And it's like, well, I thought it was going to become a park. There was this promise put out there, basically, that something was going to happen. It would be great for the community. And now it's like, things got flipped on its head. So I just wanted to come up and let you know that everyone I've talked to, when we had the neighborhood parade, and everyone I talked to is expecting it to be a park. And for something else to happen, I think would, makes me angry, for one thing, that there was this intent. And then a letter surfaced from the park board of Cincinnati that, hey, there was this intention that the property was being purchased to turn into a park. So it's like, what's going on? So that's, as a community, as a resident, we just want to know, like, what's going on? Why are things getting flipped on its head? Why isn't the commitment to turn it into a park moving forward? So, and also let you know I'm very opposed to doing otherwise. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Kim Klump. I live at 6924 Bryn Mawr Drive. So I had a couple, I just jotted down some notes, so. Chris has alluded to the fact that there was this comprehensive focus group that helped develop this bubble development plan. So my question is, why wouldn't you invite the people that live in the community to that? I know there in the other meetings that we have had, it has been alluded to that it was brought to everybody's attention, or postcards were sent, or some kind of notice was sent in the mail or something, that they were coming up with a committee. Well, I have received 2 certified letters in the last month from Springfield Township regarding this. So if it was that important and you wanted the people in the community to be involved in this process of developing this area, why wouldn't you send certified letters to those people that live within 200 feet of that development? I was never notified, and I know that in that meeting that we had at the Grove in the wintertime, that it was alluded to that people were notified. I was not notified, and I live within 200 feet of that property of Warder Park. So I just don't believe that that's the case. I don't believe that that's the truth. I think that we need to have the community that's here today that is opposed to this development involved in the process. If you are going to develop it, that we should have a voice. We should be allowed to have our opinions. Nobody talked to us. And I'm going to have to watch the bulldozers come through and flatten that land to develop that, the blue bubble that you're talking about, because I live on Bryn Mawr. So I know they're saying there's going to be some kind of buffer, but there really isn't a buffer right now. Where on Bryn Mawr, at the end of the street, it's pretty flat, so there's no buffer. So I'm going to see the back of a building. Right now I see these beautiful trees that are 100 feet tall trees. They're gorgeous, and when it's nice outside, I walk there tonight. I walk 3 miles back there tonight. So I think that the way that this has been proposed is, Chris has been saying, it can be this, or it can be this. You can develop this area and put in homes, R2, R3, whatever the verbiage is, or you can develop this beautiful, I don't think that's beautiful. I don't think that's a beautiful development. I don't think it's going to improve our community. I think it's going to invite more people into our neighborhoods that we have. It's a little it's quiet little neighborhood. And you're going to invite all of these businesses and all of this parking and all of this pollution, and you're going to tear down all those beautiful trees. What's going to happen to the environment? What's going to happen to the deer? What's going to happen to the herons that live back there, and the red-tailed hawks and the owls? and the red foxes, I've seen one red fox back there. Those creatures are going to die. They're not going to have anywhere to go. And we will not have those trees. And those trees are so important for our environment. I mean, global warming is such a huge topic right now, and we're just ignoring that fact by saying, oh, we're just going to put in these buildings, and they're going to be beautiful, and they're going to look great. Well, I'm sorry, I'd rather look at a tree than look at a building. When people go on vacation, where do they go to decompress? Do they go into buildings? Do you go into buildings to decompress? Do you vacation? Do you have a way to deal with your stress in your life? I mean, I go to Warder Nursery and I walk and I solve my problems back there. And, you know, that's how, through exercise, through fitness, through wellness. I think we can use this area as a wellness area instead of using it as a store. Or, I mean, and you guys have said this is a bedroom community. You're going to put residential area back there. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of what you guys are saying you need. You know, so I think we don't need option one. We don't need option two. We need to look outside the box, like Sue said, and come up with a solution that we're okay with. I mean, I think that we would be okay with some ideas if we have input. We have had zero input into any of this. This was something that I came to a meeting in I think it was December, and that plan was put on the screen and how great it's going to be. Well, I don't think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be really, really, really awful. And I'm actually, you know, in the past couple weeks, I've been thinking about this and I've been trying to come to terms with it. But honestly, I don't think I'll ever accept this unless I have a say, unless I have a voice in how it's developed. I think you could develop the outer parts of it and keep the core as this beautiful area. There has to be other options. You can't tell me that we're that, you know, inside this box of that it's either that or that. I mean, there just has to be another option. I'm just pleading with you as the trustees to really think outside the box. And is this what we want in our community? Because I don't want that in my community. And I don't want this to be my community if I have to deal with that. So that'll be something that I will personally have to decide. And everybody else will have to decide as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board?
I'm Dick Alexander. I live at 683 Allen Crest. This is obviously a difficult topic, but I favor this development plan and appreciate the good work that's been done on it in a bedroom community for that community to continue economically, as well as provide the services that are necessary. There's continued development that's necessary, and I think this general plan is of benefit to the whole township. Most of us have, kinds of people who show up at meetings like this have lived in the township a while. I've been here 32 years, I think. Not as long as some here. But we don't have to look back that long, maybe 15 years ago, to know that this was a community in decline. When you drove down Winton Road then, it was not a pretty sight. And I am very appreciative of what this administration has done to turn around that economic decline. Government is limited. It really depends on the private sector to develop what takes place. Government doesn't do the development, but I think you've done an extraordinary job in working with businesses. Brentwood, not that many years ago, was in much worse shape than it is now, and I think you have worked with the owners there and brought some changes about. If we just look at other contiguous communities, the cities right around here, and see their business and shopping areas, really they're all continuing to decline. this is the one that has turned around and is really coming back. And then with whatever your involvement was in working with Panera and facilitating that, and just one restaurant and business after another, I felt like you have done what a government reasonably could do to raise the level of businesses, to discourage some of those that are not desirable, and to bring ones that really do fit the community well. Some of the regulations on signage, the whole streetscape thing that you've done, a lot of small touches, just flower baskets and the Harper banners that are up, many thoughtful touches that I think reflect your hard work, thoughtfulness, and good investment in the community. And I think the kind of development that we've seen take place has been really good. It fits the community well and has raised the level and stopped the decline. So when you talk about this possibility, I think that continued development is important for this community, and you've established a very solid track record in what's been done so far. And I think that gives reason for a lot of confidence. I think you have earned some trust with this. Certainly those who are closest to the Warder area have a number of very important and very legitimate concerns that need to be heard and need to be considered in this. But I appreciate the thoughtfulness of what you've done over a number of years in this community. So I'm very favorable toward you moving ahead with developing this property.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I was waiting for the other side to get called, and you didn't do it. My name's Robin Hendley. I live at 6341 Ridgefield Drive, right off of North Bend on the other side of Winton. I've been here since 1999 and been past president of the Finneytown Civic Association. Have held township liaison probably as long as Joe Gorman's been the president. We can't find a successor, so we keep on going. The board more or less is supporting the effort. We've got a couple of members that have some concerns. They haven't jumped in with full force. They live in close to the community. I know they're looking at, are there going to be detrimental impacts? They're looking at when they retire, when they sell. But basically, we've touched base with a lot of the membership informally. A lot of them support it. They understand, as we do, that the township's very limited at the land space that they've got available to do anything. And while I'm not an engineer, I did a little walking and driving around over the weekend. What little bit of land space is vacant under your control, i.e. out off of Hamilton Avenue and things like that, if you cobble it all together, it's not anywhere close to the acreage here. And that's just an eyeball assessment, so Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure you actually know what the numbers are. But this is basically it. The Civic Association Board was invited to a meeting a few weeks ago with the Keep Water Wild folks, and we did meet with them. And there was a lot of conversation back and forth. We tried to answer questions, but we basically said that we felt that the do nothing was not an option. So if they would come back to us with an alternative, we'd look at it and possibly support it. As of my poll by email yesterday, that's not happened with any members. It certainly hasn't happened with me. I looked at the map that Chris pulled up in terms of what would happen if this doesn't go forward. I would assume the township will sell the property because you can't afford to hold on to an empty asset. If you do that, then if it goes in the hands of a private buyer, they can come in there and put back-to-back houses in there, which is just like what I live in the oldest part of Finneytown. And we've got the smallest lots, the shortest setbacks, and just in the amount of time that there's been development on North Bend since 1999, I went from having a dry basement to a wet one all the time. Cost me $4,700 to have French drains put in my basement to waterproof me. Now, I got a guarantee on the house, and that's great, but I didn't have a wet basement when I moved in. But when all the other new development and replacement development and parking lot repaving took place up on North Bend and Daly, it just shifted that water pattern over to me, and unfortunately, I'm the lowest house on Ridgefield. That's what I would caution you about if a private developer comes in and puts that density of housing. Those of you that live in Parkview Heights, if you look at the topography of that land, I'll guarantee you when it's done, every single one of you will have a wet basement.
Well,
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I see this as a far better area. You control it. If you don't like what's going in there, it's no. Am I correct?
that's been correct, Robin. We've said consistently in the public meetings, and we've had numerous ones, we're looking at this, and this rezoning tonight is to allow for the possibility of the redevelopment. It doesn't mean that it's going to be redeveloped.
Right.
It very well could be that the market will come back and not justify it be redeveloped. And I have said as a member of this board, and I think it's the board, it's a sentiment of the board, if the developer doesn't come with a development that truly is catalytic, something that is going to raise the whole township up, then that's not what we're looking for. If it's,
Right.
yeah, in a positive way, exactly. And so tonight, what we have right now, I think if we probably took not that we're going to, but if we took a vote, nobody would say the way it's zoned is a good idea for the township. And so do we leave it where it is, or do we vote to change the zoning? That's the purpose of the hearing tonight.
Correct. And if I've lived here long enough, I would expect that when the primary developer comes in and puts the proposal out, there'll probably be more public hearings for people to put input. And then at least the first handful of things, items, entities that go in there, you're probably going to do the same thing. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Then I think the whole argument of having input has been resolved before we go any further. I've lived here long enough to know you guys don't wildcat. I've lived in communities that have done that before, and that's not here. That's why I like it here. So, as I said, to rezone it, absolutely. That's the line of protection. Even later, if it doesn't go forward, then there's still a certain amount of limits on the use of the land, even if the township doesn't spearhead the development. Am I correct?
Well, if it is rezoned to a special purpose PUD, that would stay with the land, and that would apply if the township sold it. It would then, to any future developers, they would have to deal with the things that Mr. Gilbert read earlier there, the things that are on the upper right-hand portion of that plan that's on the board here as to the aspirational goals of this property.
And that's what we tried to express to them. The other part that I've said, and I don't know the acreage, I did enough development work in a past career. I know there's wetlands in there. I don't know how many acres there are, but I know there are some. And any kind of development is going to require that you have that or a similar portion of that. You can't do anything with it anyway if there's going to be any public money going in it. And it's not just federal dollars. I believe that some state Supreme Court rulings in past years have said it's public dollars, regardless of where the original source of those dollars came from. Am I correct? Now, while you have a little wiggle room, you can maybe offset to fit a development plan. You can't develop an area that's got designated wetlands. So right now, we know we've got areas that you're not going to be able to build anything on. So you might want to look and promote what that acreage is and approximately where it is. Any good developer worth his shorts can develop something successful around that and use it as an enhancement. So those might be the kind of things that I think may not be generally understood by the general public. I just hope you rezone it and we get moving forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak in opposition to this proposal?
My name is Robert Collins. I live at 853 Finney Trail. I have a question. why do we need to rezone it? What is an R2 and an R3? Does that designate the size of a lot or the type of building?
Chris, would you like to?
Explain that.
Yes.
Chris can answer that for you.
Mr. Collins, what the R2 and R3 designate are a single, and I apologize, my speaking is it is a single-family zoning designation that requires a certain lot size and public road frontage. So, for example, and I apologize, our zoning codes are roughly 140 pages long, so I don't remember the
Well,
exact.
just basically the size of lot.
6,000 square foot. So basically what that would allow for is the current zoning designation would allow someone, if the Board of Trustees decided to sell the property tomorrow, a developer could come in and build basically a subdivision across every square inch of that property with the requirement of maintaining no green space whatsoever, lots density size of about 50-foot wide lots, so 50 by 120, so around roughly 6,000 square foot lots.
So how many buildings could be put in there? How many homes? You have it diagrammed up there, so how many?
You figure, see, there's 6,000 square foot, an acre,
43, 5,
7,
60.
8 to an acre. So let's just say it's 7 to an acre,
7.
42 acres. So
7 acres, 7 per acre,
yeah, so 40 times 42.
300 roughly.
Yeah, roughly,
Okay.
roughly close to 300.
All right, so in redesignating this property, that opens the door, from what I'm hearing, that if anyone at a later date wants to do other things with that property, they could do it. They could put anything they want in there with that special designation?
It's actually the opposite.
How? How so? Because we own the property now, correct? The township?
Does, yeah.
Okay, we don't have to sell it. It's an asset, correct?
We don't have to sell it.
Right, okay. So you would have the final say as to whether or not you would sell it to someone to come in and develop it in such a fashion as that. Presently, you have that authority,
We do,
correct?
except all three of us are not going to be on the board forever.
Well, could you put it in some kind of a contract for the township?
I think the part that's being missed is that if this board or a future board would sell it as it's zoned, you couldn't stop the developer from doing that. They would have a right as a matter of law to zone it that way, to build it that way.
But
And you could not stop them.
could the township not put an amendment or something to the effect that it could not be sold? It's an asset. You have to sell your assets?
Well, no, as a board, we do what we do, and then another board comes along down the line, and they could decide to do something different.
So you mean that asset,
We don't control an asset in perpetuity.
right, but the board does?
No, well, another board might.
Yeah, another board.
Another board 10 years
They
from
would
now
have to bring
might.
it before us, the voters, right?
No, it's
Or could they
zoned
sell it without
residential. It's zoned residential. They could sell the property to somebody and they could start building right away on that today.
Without any hearings or anything?
No, it's zoned residential.
So the benefit of the rezoning tonight is to look at how we're going to maintain the catalyst and enhance the green space that's there and keep a part of it green space.
Ms. McFarland, let me
Chris, can you go next?
just from a matter of pure clarification, what the zoning means. When a property is zoned, as this property is currently today, that is an as-of-right use that that landowner has to develop or utilize that property. If this Board of Trustees, as I mentioned, would decide to sell this property tomorrow, let's assume that it isn't rezoned, that the zoning that's in place today and has been for many, many years remains, and this board decides to sell the property tomorrow. Whoever you sell that property to, once again, could develop that property just like that as a matter of right, legally, under the current zoning of that property. It would require 0 public hearings, it would require 0 input, and that property owner now has a legal right to develop that property in the manner in which it's zoned today. One of the ideas that this board has put forth, and purely from a professional zoning and planner standpoint, is a matter of fact, is by rezoning it to a PUD in the manner in which is being proposed tonight with the green space that's being proposed and required, would require that in the future, no matter who you sold this property to, the requirement for the green space that's shown in this preliminary development plan and the aspirational development parameters that Mr. Hernalaw alluded to would run with the land no matter who owned it, and would be required to adhere to those requirements and maintain that green space in perpetuity, unlike what would be required under current zoning, which is zero green space. That's a matter of fact from a professional zoning standpoint. The idea of doing other things with the property or never selling it has nothing to do with zoning. That's a political decision of this body, not a zoning issue.
So is there any set amount of property that you're indicating that must be reserved as green space? Because I don't see anything on there that says X number of acres must be preserved as green space.
It's see the green.
I see that, but I don't see any description as to, because as you said, that's just a a broad idea. There's nothing in concrete.
There is no
Right.
development plan for this property at this time. This is conceptual, but go, Chris, you want to address?
Just from a clarification standpoint, what happens after this particular plan, if it's approved, would be the development of what's referred to as a final development plan. At that stage, the exact acreage, the exact dimensions, the exact property areas that would be maintained as green space will be more clearly defined and specified in the final development plan. Prior to any development, prior to a bulldozer, a shovel, anything going in the ground, a final development plan will have to be approved by the zoning commission that meets the spirit and development parameters of this preliminary development plan. At that time, as I mentioned, the exact acreage of green space that Mr. Collins is referring to will be specified in certainty and will be locked in place for the future of that property, no matter who owns it. So again, there is another step after this, which I think is being missed here. It's the development of the final development plan and the approval of that prior to any development taking place, which will clear up a lot of these questions and concerns that people are having here this evening.
Can you again define the purpose of our meeting tonight?
It's to rezone the property to an SPPUD with the preliminary development plan and parameters that are being proposed on this plan.
And that's it?
Glenn, if I could just add one thing, however, yeah, there is a final development plan stage, and that's where all of the details really come out, where you see building footprints, you see specific uses, you get down on final development plans to specific types of trees and landscaping. That's how detailed it gets. However, to your question, the large area in green, this plan is the preliminary development plan. So it's not that it can just suddenly be something different. In other words, that area in green there isn't going to be a final development plan that comes in at some point in the future where that's suddenly going to be mixed use or residential. That has to remain green. Now, the plan is a little conceptual, so these lines aren't meant to be scaled, so it might vary slightly because of exact topography and exact locations, but it's not that these uses are what can be approved and nothing different.
Okay, well,
So that, it is, a PUD plan is in many ways the most restrictive form of zoning there is, because it is narrowing it down and it is only approving a very specific set of things. This is a very, very site-specific plan done for this site. So it is highly restrictive. Now, you can have a variety of uses here, but the details and the development parameters and design parameters are much, much, much more restrictive in a PUD than they are in any other form of zoning. That's why, in essence, we're doing the very thing that you're asking for, is the board is setting this property aside and saying whether we own it or somebody else owns it in the future, this is what they have to do.
but they can develop it.
They can develop it, absolutely, but it must be developed according to
Parts
these
of it.
parameters.
Right, but they can develop it, so again, we would lose out on that whole area being green space.
Maybe the whole area,
Right.
but this plan is designating about a third of the total acres staying green space forever.
Well, one opposed.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the zoning proposal?
Thank you. Dave Hughes, 853 Denier Place. And Robert, I got to tell you, you're at 853 Finney Trail, and I'm tired of getting your mail. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Robin, you made a good point. It was easy to say no. It was easy. Getting the petitions, signatures and the residents to say, you know, WTF, welcome to Finneytown. So we have to offer an alternative. We have to start finding ways, and I don't know that the township is ready for this yet, but what Keep Water is working on with consultation with various preserves, Hamilton County parks, is to find an alternative to development, because how long this is going to go on? And as Mr. Onawa said, nothing may happen, and just letting it sit is not an alternative. So at some point, you know, Mike and Chris, I think we can, you know, have another meeting, maybe it's months away, and at least look at what's possible. A budget we just had a meeting at the Northern Hills United Methodist. At that meeting alone, we raised $3,000, and that's nothing compared to $1.2 million, but it's a start. So we're looking for something that's possible, affordable, and actually supported by the community. We're just talking about some very simple, low investment things like maybe a fishing dock, walking trails, which have already been established. Frisbee golf, I had a couple of guys that are enthusiasts, and not everybody supports this. But they said, water's perfect for Frisbee golf. It's very popular. You got to wait in line at Winton Woods to play on the weekends. We're talking about a gravel lot, a couple of signs, better access, a couple of benches, and a wastebasket. And Chris, maybe I can get with you and see what the current budget is right now for maintaining water, and then we can go from there. But we have a lot of volunteers who would be more than happy to help and do, you know, clean up occasionally. So there are ways to really keep the cost minimal. I think Farbach Warner is one example. They only have 20 acres. Their parking lot is full in the middle of the week. You also have the Griffin Family Preserve in Evendale, which is also quite popular. And the illusion was made that the greenhouses might be moved or something. That's not going to happen because the city just spent $200,000 on upgrades. That's going to stay there. Those 10 acres are going to stay. And I think Mr. Alexander made a good point about what I see as the real core, and that's up at Brentwood. Yes, I think what the township has done with some of the new businesses there has been great. It has been improved. That doesn't mean we keep expanding it. That's not, I don't think, an argument. It's hard to factor in the value of something like a preserve. You can't quantify it. You can't say, well, we're going to get this out of this based on, it's just too hard to quantify. So I think that's where we're kind of having this divide here, is that the community does see the value, and I think the township, quite frankly, could appreciate it. I want to talk briefly about the zoning committee and master plan committee. Based on my observations, I'm not even sure that many of those people have even ever seen water. So to make a judgment on 50 acres, I mean, this is just my observation based on the meetings, strikes me as a little removed. So, and that's really about it. I'll be in contact, either Mike or Chris, and we'll figure out at some point, I know maybe we're not ready right now, that we can proceed on this. So, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the proposal? Is there anyone that wants to speak in favor of the proposal? you come on up, sure. Yes, sir.
My name is Tim Doherty. We own the house at 805 Finney Trail for about 11 years now. The concern I have, and Chris, you're saying that the entire area that's proposed for this development is about 54 acres, I believe?
The entire area that's shown in this preliminary development plan actually is just under 61 acres, but a good portion of that, probably 9 acres of that, is the Whitaker Elementary School site.
9 acres belongs to this?
9 acres is what?
9 acres of that is the Whitaker site. The 9 acres of the 60 that I referenced is the Whitaker site.
I couldn't hear you.
Whitaker Elementary, that's Finneytown Local School District. And then some of this included is also the city's area,
Actually, it is not. The city's area is still here. That's about 10 acres.
Okay.
This area makes up, the 42 acres is the water site, which is here. This additional roughly 10 acres was acquired by the township over the past decade because of its proximity to water.
So right now, what this concept map is showing is an entrance coming off of Winton, going east, right there at the southern limits of the proposed development area, and off of North Bend going west. And I'm knowing exactly how long Finney Trail is. I'm going to say that's about 9/10 of a mile from Winton over to North Bend. One of the things that's kind of different for me is that looking at a planned use development concept map without having the developer being the one to present it. So this is kind of a preemptive strike, so to speak, is what I'm seeing here. Is that what basically we're talking about, right? We don't have a developer. The developer does not have an actual implementation plan as to what.
He does not have an implementation plan. We do have a developer, and he did give a presentation at the Grove a few months ago, and there was many people there.
And is there more detail than this as to what?
No, because until we know what the interest level is and where, we can't get specific about what exactly is going to go how.
So they haven't proposed, your developer hasn't proposed something that they're beyond this?
This is a preliminary plan for the property.
Okay, and the developer is willing to go with this?
Yes.
I think it's important to remember that this is a preliminary just to rezone it. It
I
has
understand.
nothing to
What
do
I'm-
The developer's right there, by the way.
Yeah,
All right.
this plan was developed in concert with the
Okay.
developer, yes.
Okay, so what's the plan for that proposed roadway connecting North Bend and Winton? Does anybody know any?
It's not, there isn't a
There's no
plan
plan.
yet.
So there's no preliminary traffic engineering studies on either end? No idea how much, those being the primary entrances to the area, it seems to me that if you're talking about retail development in the interior core, that's going to require a fair amount of through traffic, so to speak. And I'm just kind of wondering about that. I'm concerned.
At this
about
point,
that.
we don't know if there will be a through road or not.
Again, I think the word is
We'll
preliminary.
I'll tell you what, we'll let
I'm sorry.
Mr. Nyer, maybe we should let Mr. Nyer speak, and he can address some of these issues, probably better than we're going to.
Okay.
But yeah, do you have any other questions?
I'm
Yeah.
concerned about the area getting chopped up. I appreciate the fact that we're going to leave some green space. It'd be nice to leave it all as green space. If there's going to be development on either end, but to leave the core once you start slicing it up, it's, the idea behind a nature preserve or a protected area like that becomes, you're looking at a lot of fringe area then, and it's not really viable as a green space. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the proposed zone change? Is there anyone that would speak in favor of it? Yeah. Well, go ahead, Joe. You've been waiting a long time. Go ahead, Joe. He'll be brief.
I'm Joe Gorman, 8824 Falmouth Drive. Been living in Finneytown now for 19 years. I'm also the president of the Finneytown Civic Association. Been involved in a lot of different groups here in Finneytown and Springfield Township. And when we first heard of Warder being acquired by the township 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, I was very excited about that because I know we need some new housing options here in Finneytown and Springfield Township. And the Warder project, I think, will be a great addition to that. And I have to thank the trustees and staff really for being so open and so available to everybody. I mean, this is really what the township government's all about, where we can, as citizens and residents here, we can come right here, meet with Chris and Mike whenever. And I think that accessibility has been very good for this process. And again, I'm very hopeful that a new mixed-use project here at the Warder area will satisfy everybody eventually. So, but I just I want to thank everybody for just being there and being around and being accessible. And I look forward to what Mr. Nyer's got to say. And I think he's got the College Hill project now too, up on North Bend and Hamilton. And that's been a project that's been around for probably 25, 30 years. We're not there yet, but at least we are in the pipeline for something, I think, good. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Mr. Nyer, I know you've been patiently sitting back there waiting.
Thank you for the opportunity for my daughter to learn something about civics and real estate and raising her hand. Even dads have to raise their hand and take their turn. The option was for her to be with mommy, who, while a good Springfield Township girl, has an unusual affection for Guns N' Roses. So that's where she would have been. This is a much better lesson. So thank you for the chance to be with you and bring her along. It is late, and there have been a lot of good comments. I won't necessarily address all of them one by one, but I will try to give just a bit of context. For the record, my name is Tom Nyer Jr. I live at 419 Torrance Court in Cincinnati. So I think maybe the way to do this in a useful, abbreviated context is to talk about sort of 5 steps in the development process and where we are. And I would view those steps as stewardship and imagination and presentation and investment, and then, again, stewardship. And where we are right now is the first stage of stewardship. And the trustees, many years ago, decided that they wanted to be stewards of this asset, and they bought it from the park board so that nobody else could develop it. Another word for zoning is entitlement. And a developer or a prospective purchaser would be entitled to do that development that Chris has demonstrated that is offensive to anybody's sensibilities, including a pagan developer in this day and age. But that is the entitled use of the property as it sits today. And the trustees do, in my opinion, a good job of exercising stewardship to spend township resources to take control of the future of that asset. And now we're at the stage that I would call imagination. And zoning, particularly at this preliminary stage, is really about the imagination of what a piece of property or pieces of property together could be. And an imagination is the product of a collective process, and it is a process that leads to a new set of entitlements. What we are not entitled to do, however, is direct the market what it's going to do. And so what we have to do is put our best foot forward in terms of entitling the property that will allow us to be entitled to succeed in the marketplace. If we are not successful in the marketplace, then my company and I don't get paid. In fact, we lose a lot of time and a fair amount of money trying to create a project in partnership with the township trustees. And I think that's an important element here, is that we are not a developer who is coming in and begging the township trustees for a new zoning, which is the normal protocol, frankly. You go to a jurisdiction and you say, hey, this is in your This is in your boundaries. This is what we want to do. Please let us do it. Please, pretty please. This is something where we went through a competitive process with the township trustees. They selected my firm and I to help connect the community's aspirations with the market's reality. And that's what we have been engaged to do. But that engagement doesn't pay us anything unless that market reality comes to fruition. And that is, I think, an important element, because that we are now at this imagination stage. Then we get to what I call the presentation stage, which is perhaps a more creative word for marketing. Once we have clarity as to what the new zoning is, then we can go to the market and say, here is what's available to you. And it's a give and take. The lines are pretty clear. And as Mike said, it might evolve a few feet this way or that, but the general allocation is not, you're not going to have that 30% of the property that is currently green space that goes to 3%. Number one, topographically and geotechnically, that couldn't happen, but also that's not the entitlement that we receive. So we go to the marketplace and we say, here it is. And we do things like traffic studies. I was once one of those 1,600, well, at that point it was 1,200 young men at St. Xavier High School, and I agree, some traffic engineering is important to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves and take a bad intersection and make it worse. That's a part of the presentation process. When you go to the market and all the various constituents say, this is what it is that we think we can put in your township and that we can hire you, developer, to create. Once you get through that, then we're at the stage of investment. And that is an investment of the township and time and money. It is an investment of other jurisdictions to help with roadways. It's an investment of the private sector to purchase the property and to build the vertical assets that the market says that it wants, that are consistent with the zoning that has been entitled by the jurisdiction. And once that's finished, then we get back to what I'll call stewardship again. And stewardship means keeping an asset relevant for the time in which it currently resides. Brentwood was a relevant asset when it was developed 30-odd years ago, and it's no longer relevant. It's better now than it was a few years ago because of new ownership and new investment and some things, but it's not an architectural or a market gem, and no credible person is going to sit here and tell you that it is. It's not something that the township owns, so they can't directly compel the redevelopment of that asset, unlike water, which they do own, so they can, in a responsible way, compel the utilization of that property. But whoever owns whatever happens at this property 30 years from now is going to have to continue to be a good steward of that asset. And whoever said it, forgive me, I don't recall who, but you're right. 30 years from now, what we build in the next 3 years will become somewhere between outdated and obsolete. And whoever owns it at that point in time will have to invest in that asset, and the community will have to continue to invest in itself so it doesn't become outdated and obsolete. And I think that's the process in which we are engaged right now, is investing in the community so we don't become economically and socially outdated and obsolete. And that is what we as your development arm for this particular project are here to do. And thank you for the opportunity to do so.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor of the proposal? It appears that there is not. At this time, then, I would like to close the public comment portion of the meeting for board deliberation. And I think I would, if I can start this off as the chair.
Do we need to get a motion and close it, or just?
I don't think, no, we're closing the public comment at this point. Everyone's spoken. And so I think as the chair, I'd just like to say a few things. And first things I want to say, I'm very appreciative of everybody who's come out here, spent time tonight. And I'm proud of the fact that we can have differing views, but everybody can sit in this room and be polite to each other and be respectful. And while not everyone may see the same thing, it says a lot about our community that we can do that. I've been in plenty of other communities and public meetings where they turn, nasty and really just, counterproductive. And so I appreciate everybody's demeanor and I appreciate the comments that everybody has had here. I think they're heartfelt. I think they're they're important, and there's things that's everybody said here that, is relevant to what this property is about. As one of the last speakers here mentioned, this is one of the biggest chunks of land left in Finneytown. And Finneytown is a, important neighborhood in the township. And it was for that reason that many years ago, this board, well, Gwen and I, we were on it, we decided we need to take control of this. Because we did not want to see, we were afraid of what would happen to the community if we got an R2 or an R3 development. And so it was for that reason that we said we got to take control of this. Here we are tonight, and we have the question before this board, and we've been through a long process now. We've had meetings. Well, we've really had meetings and discussions about this since, I want to say, 2007, or maybe before. Mike, you'd probably know better, but there have been countless meetings on countless occasions, and we've talked about this. And I think that we have our choice tonight is going to be, do we vote in favor of the resolution, or do we vote against it? If we vote against it, we're left with the R3, the R2, and the R3 zoning, and we're left with no restrictions on this property, zero green space. And as you said, zoning to a developer means entitlements and what you can go in and what you can do as a matter of right. So I think it's important, from my perspective, I'm in favor of this resolution. The township, when we originally purchased this property, we did so with the intent that we were going to develop it into an expansive park, not a nature preserve. Due to funding limitations, which have hit local governments across the state in the last decade, and a shift in the needs and desires of the community, we embarked on a development feasibility study back in, Mike, 2006, 2007, with, what was the name of that? Property Advisors. And they were the ones that confirmed through statistics and other things that there was a need for additional new development and additional housing choices in the township. The idea of developing this property was a way to provide a solution to some of those housing needs, to increase the tax base and lessen the tax burden on the residents throughout the township. As township trustees, we have to answer to all 36,000 people in the township because we had to use their money to buy this property. I think that the proposed preliminary development plan tries to balance some of the needs that we have here in a reasonable manner. I can understand the argument for keeping the property natural and see how people, particularly if you live near it, as I think a lot of the people do here this evening, may not be particularly in favor of doing anything with it. But we have to think about what's best for everyone in the township. Green space is important. We have probably more green space than any other community I can think of. If you look at one of our maps there of the entire township, about a third of our township is green space with the, what do we have, 13 township parks, 12, something like that, Chris? 13, and of course Winton Woods and some of the other city parks adjacent. But having that much green space comes at a price to the taxpayers, particularly when we're primarily a bedroom community. We think that if we do pursue this, there is a possibility that we'll provide varying housing choices and at the same time can preserve a lot of the green space that we have here. And I think it's important, there was some discussion here tonight, if we take this from a straight letter district and move it into a PUD, that is the most restrictive form of zoning, is a general rule that you can have, where the township goes from not having really a lot of control now with what the ultimate plan would ever be to having a great deal more. So we've had extensive public review and comment back in 2011 with the original master plan process. Again, most recently here in 2016 when we updated our neighborhood master plan. The resident-based committee, I know it was 50 people, unanimously recommended that developing this property as a mixed-use area. The Hamilton County, or the Township Zoning Commission and the Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission found that the proposed map amendment and submitted preliminary development plan to be consistent with the township's future land use plan and have recommended approval as well. We think this is a way ultimately, if this property is developed in a special purpose PUD, that it's a way to keep Springfield Township relevant and viable into the future. We agree that green space is very important, and I'm committed, I know what the board is, in keeping a large portion of this property green space that can be enjoyed by all our residents. And I think it's a way that we can try and balance the needs of everyone in the township. So there's probably, sometimes they say the best settlement is one where no one walks away totally happy, but I think for this reason, we've tried to balance the various interests in the township as best we can in a responsible manner. And for that reason, I would have to say that I would vote in favor of the zoning.
Joe, I agree with you. I mean, we've been discussing this since actually last year. I wasn't around in '07 when you started talking about it, but I know we had meetings last November, December, and through this year. And I mean, the only solution that I've been given is to keep it the way it is, and that doesn't work for the entire township, and that's who we represent. So I agree.
And I've been around since 2008, and I recall the initial reason why we purchased that property was to maintain some control on the future, regarding the future of our township. And so over the years, there have been a lot of changes, and then when we've had the comprehensive master plan meeting, the most recent one, which was in 2016, it reflected back on a lot of the discussion from the one in 2011. But also being future-oriented as well. And I think it's important that we stay focused on the fact that what this meeting was all about, which is looking at a core PUD plan. And there are opportunities, I see a lot of opportunities. I've heard from individuals here tonight, and I'm so glad you came, and I'm so glad that some of you had some possibilities of solutions. I like the one where, with the green space, maybe we can look at, or something related to special areas for kids, or kids with special needs, or individuals with special needs. That's critical as well. And I just appreciate your thoughts and your comments. Based on the discussion, based on what I think is the right thing for us to do to move forward for the development of the township, I support this resolution that's coming before us, and for all the reasons that both Joe and Mark have said. But also you may not realize it, but those individuals that were here tonight did have some possibilities, had some suggestions, and throughout the entire process, we will always, as we've always been, kept a transparent form of government. And I thank you, Mr. Nair, for coming and bringing your daughter as well. You put me in mind of myself. Sometimes I have to go to meetings with my granddaughter. And it's a learning opportunity for them all. But as of this moment, I think for the betterment of all the township, as well as the ability to have some regulations around green space in that area, I support the resolution.
Okay. With that, then, we have resolution number 57, 2016, resolution approving a zoning map amendment for listed parcels from R2 and R3 single-family residential to SP PUD special purpose planned unit development. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Bernie?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Mr. Honalaw?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. I don't believe we have any other business before the board. But we sincerely appreciate your input, and we, as Gwen said, we are transparent. We're going to be listening. There's going to be more discussions and meetings on this property, I'm sure, as we go in the future. So thank you very much. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's
I
adjourned.
would like everyone